It's easy in the cut and thrust of negotiating a research collaboration to agree to an IP sharing regime. You know the sort of thing. Everyone agrees to share an IP ownership. Maybe there's a IP management committee that's formed and possibly a separate committee to manage commercialisation. And everybody shares in terms of beneficial ownership in accordance with the background IP and the contributions that they bring. Sounds easy. Project. Everyone's happy. Everyone feels that they have some element of control in the project and they feel like they have a stake. But ask yourself, how does this work in practice? Let's imagine that as collaborators we've all gone into this project with the intent of generating an outcome that is capable of being transferred to a third party for commercialisation or other impact. If that's the case, then we're far better placed to be thinking about the IP arrangements right at the outset of the collaboration. So when we get to the point where we need to transfer that IP to a third party, that it is clean and unencumbered and it's not a drama to be able to do that license. Our role as commercialisation professionals is to ensure that that IP is capable of being transferred. Let me put this into a practical scenario. 4 organisations, 1 research party and 3 industry parties, 2 of whom are based overseas, decide that they're going to collaborate on a project with the express purpose of developing technology that gives an alternative processing means for coal deposits. They agree to jointly, legally own the IP and to share in any beneficial interests in accordance with the background IP and contributions they make to the project. But it's okay because they appoint one of their party to be responsible for managing the IP on behalf of all of the collaborators and to manage any potential commercialisation. The catch is that that party with those responsibilities has to get approval from all of the collaborators before they can make any decisions on IP or commercialisation. So some years later, the project has ended and there is a good outcome and there is a new technology formed and a licensee is found. Approval is granted to make an exclusive royalty bearing and milestone bearing license to that party and everybody goes away happy. However, a number of years later the licensee ceases paying the amounts due on the license. So the party responsible for managing that license, and by this time you would have guessed that that party was CSIRO, my organisation, decides that we need to do something about it. So we call a meeting with the licensee and we start the process of negotiating a settlement to get the unpaid royalties paid and to work out what the future payment regime will be. Again, sounds okay in theory. However, in practice, for every agreement reached, CSIRO had to go to all of the other parties and get their approval. This was no small matter. Remember, this is some years later from the collaboration. You've still got 2 parties based overseas, so you've already got a logistical issue. And of course, all the people involved were not involved at the beginning of the project. So it adds months and months and eventually years to the negotiation with the licensee. The licensee also plays this to their advantage. So you can imagine we're getting close to a resolution and then all of a sudden the licensee proposes another last minute change because they know we have to go right around the approval cycle. Eventually, about 3 years or so later, after calling the initial negotiation meeting, we reach a resolution. I can tell you that the overhead that costs CSIRO in terms of time and effort was considerable and certainly not commensurate with the ultimate commercial terms that were reached. We certainly won't put ourselves in that position again, and my advice to you is ensure that you and your organisations don't find yourself in that position either. So what's the bottom line here? Agreeing to joint IP ownership and joint decision making may seem like the easy solution, particularly if you've got collaborators all arguing over who should own the IP. You are far better to appoint one party that acts for all parties to manage the IP and manage the commercialisation and put beneficial ownership arrangements in place. That way, that single party is free to be able to do the negotiations and act on behalf of all the parties. You can put information rights in place so that you can be kept informed, but don't insist on joint decision-making rights. Believe me, if a commercial party gets wind of the fact that they actually have to negotiate with multiple parties, they will run a mile. And that's a lose-lose situation for all of us.